Hola, mi nombre es Edgar Sánchez de Michoacán, México, and I'm based here in LA.
How old were you, and when did you get into golf?
I got into golf. My dad was a cook at a golf course, and when my brother turned 13, we moved to the States when he was 11, and then when he turned 13, my dad brought him to start caddying, and he was actually naturally just a very good golfer. Within his first year, he got very, very good, and the members loved him, so he was doing very well at caddying and making a lot of money. And when I turned 13, I said, well, I want to go caddy. I want to make some money. And started caddying when I was 12. I thought it was the most boring sport in the world, and I said I'm never going to play this. And within a few months, I picked up a golf club. I started hitting balls with my brother, and I was just hooked. There is no sport like golf that just hooks you once you start hitting good shots and getting better at the sport. It grabs you, and you hit it better each time, and it just keeps getting more and more addicting. So I was 12 years old, and when we started caddying, and just been playing ever since.
Cool. You kind of answered it a little bit, but what do you love most about golf?
I love being outside. First of all, there's nothing like being on a golf course when it's 75 degrees out and just playing. You're being out there by yourself. It's such a calming feeling. But what I really, really love about it is it's such a great equalizer. So in caddying, I've been caddying for 16 years now. I've caddied for so many people from every kind of walk of life you can think of. Caddy for other caddies from other golf courses who don't have crappy equipment and don't really look like a golfer, but they go out there and they're great players. And then I've caddied for billionaires who have the best equipment, and they've been playing for years and they're not very good, and they're out there and they're asking you for advice. This is somebody who normally you'd probably be picking their brain, like, how did you get so successful? How did you make all your money? But they're out there and they're struggling with this, and they're asking you, like, hey, how do you hit the shot? Or, what am I doing wrong? And you're out there giving them knowledge. So it kind of just levels everybody out. It really humbles you a lot. It's humbled me a ton of times. Um, I remember I caddied for Darryl Strawberry, which is a professional athlete that I grew up watching when he played for the Mets and the Yankees, and this guy was just a physical specimen. And he's out there asking me for tips because I was a better golfer than he was. So like it just really levels everybody out. It humbles a lot of people, and just when you're out there on the golf course, doesn't matter who you are outside of the golf course. On the golf course, everybody's just kind of on an level playing field, and it's pretty unique to that game.
What struggles did you face when taking on this sport?
I would say the biggest thing we struggled with, and it was just accessibility to the sport. It's very expensive sport, not only equipment wise. A set of golf clubs can run you a couple $1,000s, and to play around the golf, you go to a public course and it's 40, $50 to play, plus paying for the cart if you want to ride. And we just didn't have much access to it. The only reason we got to play it, my brother and myself, was because we worked at a golf course, and because they saw that we were pretty good players and we were good caddies, we were well liked there, they would allow us to go and play once the members were gone. So that's the only reason we were able to play. Had it not been for that, we just literally could not afford to play the game. So that was probably the biggest barrier to the game. I remember my brother, he was taught by one of the other caddies, and when he taught him, he said, my brother's naturally lefty. He said, you should learn to play righty because it's tough to afford clubs. He's like, a lot of your clubs are probably going to be hand-me-downs from other members. And he said, we don't have a lot of lefty members, so you should learn how to play righty. And that's the only reason my brother plays righty nowadays, is because just so he could have clubs to play with. And all my clubs at the beginning were all hand-me-downs from him. So, had he played lefty, I probably wouldn't have had clubs to play with. So just the accessibility, because of how expensive it is and how exclusive it can be, was probably the toughest time we had with golf itself.
Cool. What does it mean to you to be a Latino in this sport?
That's always something I always took pride in. Every time I go play, especially when I was in high school and in college, playing tournaments and also playing local tournaments in the metropolitan section, like the New York State Open qualifier and stuff like that. Every time I teed it up, I really did feel like I was, representing not just, I'm from Mexico, so not just people from Mexico, but just Latinos, because when you stood up there on that tee and people were watching you, I remember in college specifically, like, I was one of either the only one or one of two or three Latinos playing in the entire tournament. So every time you teed it up, people were looking at you. They were like, this guy looks different, you don't see a lot of Latinos out there. And every time I stepped it up, I felt like I was just representing, all the Latinos out there. Not only in how I played, but also how I conducted myself on the golf course. I always tried to, uphold myself to a higher standard with golf etiquette, because I knew if I was I acted poorly out on the golf course, people were going to assume, well, this is how Latinos would act on a golf course if there were more of them. So I was always very conscious of that, but also very proud of it. I felt proud of being a Latino out there and representing, people that grew up like me, and I always had it in the back of my mind, definitely whenever I went to play golf, and especially a tournament when it was a bigger platform.
What are your thoughts about the stereotypes around golf?
Like the classic ones are just, it's a white person sport or a rich person sport. And maybe it used to be that way, but I think nowadays people just use it as an excuse to not try something that they're maybe unfamiliar with. It's very easy to say, well, I'm not rich, that's a rich person sport. But no, there's way more access nowadays to golf than there used to be back in the day. There's a lot more public courses that you can go play. There's open driving ranges that even if you're not playing, you can go practice. And I think people use those old stereotypes, even though at one point they were practically true. Nowadays, people just use it to kind of hold themselves back. And I think people need to get over those stereotypes and just go out there and try the sport. Who knows, you might be really good at it, like my brother was, or maybe you're not that good at it, but you really, really love it. And it's such a great sport that brings a lot of opportunities, and I think people just use the stereotypes to just kind of limit themselves. That's really all, because nowadays anybody can play the sport.
What opportunities has golf given you?
It's brought me definitely a ton of opportunities, from small ones to really big ones. I would say the biggest one was just to go to college and graduate. I was very lucky. I started working when I was 12 years old, and caddying is a job that really allows you, if you're good and you work at a good place, make a lot of money, make a very good living. And having been able to start working as a young kid, I was able to save up money during the summers while I was in school. And unfortunately, my parents could not pay for my education. They couldn't pay for college. We weren't poor, but they were definitely living a little more scarcely. They were trying to just keep a roof over our heads, pay for the rent, and make sure we were always had food on the table. But they, as much as they wanted to, they couldn't afford to pay for college. They wanted me to go to school, but they just couldn't afford to help me with it. And being able to caddy allowed me to make enough money to go to school and put myself through college. And I was the first person to graduate from my family from a university. So, that was a very big deal, and they were very proud of it. And it definitely came because of caddying and because of the game of golf. And then I remember once I was about to graduate, I was a couple semesters in my senior year, a couple semesters from graduating, and I went and I interviewed with Morgan Stanley Wealth Management. And I remember they just said no. They said, you don't have enough experience. I had no internship experience because I was working the summers to be able to pay for college. So I couldn't take that unpaid internship because then I wouldn't have been able to pay for the school year. So I remember Morgan Stanley just flat out turned me away. They said, no, we can't hire you. And a semester before I graduated, I reached out to some of the members that I used to caddy for on the golf course. And one of them I got to know very well because I used to caddy for his wife as well. And I used to teach one of his kids. And I reached out to him and I said, hey, Ira, graduating next semester with my degree in economics. I was hoping that maybe you could refer me to somebody who might be hiring or, somebody within your company. He used to work for Morgan Stanley and he was a financial advisor. So I figured I had no chance because they already turned me down. He, without hesitation, answered me the same day in my email. He said, once you graduate, I would love to hire you. No interview, no recommendations needed. He said, if you work half as hard as you work on the golf course, he said, I know you're going to do great in the office. So having made those connections led me to my first job out of college that I had literally just been turned down from the same exact job. And once I graduated, once I finished with them after a year, Morgan Stanley was begging me to stay and work with them again after they had turned me down a year before, so that never would have happened without the game of golf because those connections that I made with those very important people, people that are captains of industry out here, had they not opened the door for me, I never would have had that opportunity to work there. So that's definitely one of the bigger opportunities that golf has brought me.
What are your favorite places to spend time outside the golf course?
Outside the golf course, I love being outdoors. Even though I'm already outdoors on the golf course, but I love right behind my house, about say 5 minutes away, if that. There's Brand Park Trail, which is a short but tough trail, and it's got one of the best views, in my opinion, of LA. You can see both sides of the valley. You can see the ocean, and I love going hiking up there. There are times where I'm at the gym, and I'm like, oh, I can run on the treadmill, or I can just go hike on the trail and see, get a great view and get some fresh air. And it's just, you're up top and you're kind of by yourself. It's not a very traffic trail. Like, a lot of people don't go there. I don't know why. But it's just great to be up there, just kind of alone with your thoughts. My roommate showed it to me, and, I go 2 to 3, sometimes even 4 times a week. Just get a little exercise and just kind of get away from the city. And it's just, I love going hiking, but that trail specifically is probably my favorite in LA.
Do you have any unexpected passions or interests? Something that would be unexpected for a pro golfer to be into?
I love to cook. Like I said before, my dad was a cook at the golf course where we started working back in Syosset on Long Island. And he knew more of like the American cuisine. So when we were growing up, he would make American dishes. He would make burgers and fries or chili or anything of the sort. And then a lot of the meals that he would make at the golf course. And my mom, obviously, the traditional Mexican cuisine. Stuffed peppers, menudo, pozole, and we kind of had this cool fusion of both cuisines. And as I got older, and especially once I moved out on my own, I would always pick their brains of like, hey, Dad, how do I cook this? Or, Mom, how do you season this? And I kind of really got an affinity for cooking. I love spending time in the kitchen. Even though I'm not nearly as good as they were, because they were both great chefs. I love cooking. I love spending time in the kitchen. Just put a playlist on, play some music, and go to town on it. So that's always been, not a lot of people know it, but it's like a little passion of mine.
Who are the meaningful people in your life?
I would say, obviously, my immediate family, but like a lot of my friends have been very, very instrumental, I would say, in my life. From my friends back home that I grew up with, my friend Nelson, who I've known since the fourth grade, my roommate in college back in New York, you know, even though we don't see each other more than a couple times a year, I can always call them and be like, hey, I'm having problems with this, can we talk about it for a few minutes? And we just pick up right wherever we left off last time. There's no lag, it's like we saw each other, a few days ago. And then all my friends here in LA that I moved out here not knowing anybody, and it's just a great support system that I have out here because I don't have any family out here. So I know anytime I need something, I can just reach out to them, and I always have somebody either to bounce ideas off of, or somebody to get advice from, or somebody to just listen whenever you need to rant about something. It's great to have that, especially when your immediate family's not here. The people that you might normally do it with, get that advice from them when they're not here. It's great to have somebody who's practically just as close and is always willing to do that for you. So they're very important to me, especially out here in Los Angeles.
Just in case they want names, because they're asking would we have access to them to capture part of your story and whatever? Do you think that they would want names?
Oh yeah. So like my friend Nelson, who I've known since fourth grade, he's always been been around whenever I needed for something. Out here, my roommate Drea, who's the first person I met in LA, and she really she makes LA, especially at the beginning, make it feel like home. She's from Jersey herself, so we had that East Coast, familiarity. But then she introduced me to a ton of her friends, like Ajayla, my friend Matt, who then became very good friends with me, and that definitely made the transition a whole lot easier. When I moved out here, since I didn't know anybody, I would go to the golf range just to hit balls because that felt familiar. It was like the only thing that I had that felt the same as back home in New York, being on the golf course or being on the driving range, because whenever I'm on the driving range, it just feels normal. And she was able to introduce me to a lot of people who became very good friends and kind of gave it a more homey feel. So she was definitely very, very important. And also my sister back home, she was just always quick to call if she saw that I was struggling with something, or she would just randomly call us, hey, how are you? So it was always nice to have her, talk to her, and she kind of also brought that feeling of being at home, which is important, especially when you move kind of pretty far away. So.
Who are your personal heroes?
I would say people that I don't know. Lee Trevino. Lee Trevino, 6-time major champion. He's from Texas, but I think his dad was Mexican. So he kind of put Latinos on the map on the PGA Tour. He's one of the greatest ever. And, it's definitely like a pride thing when people mention Trevino as being one of the greatest golfers, and he's of Mexican descent. So he's somebody that I always look up to, and not only was he just a great golfer, but he was kind of like a people's champion. Everybody loved Lee. He was always a good guy. He would, I remember there's a story of people are out there watching him play in a tournament, and there was a lightning in the area, so they had to evacuate people. And, the golfers are quick to leave, understandably. They're not trying to get struck by lightning. And he stayed out there with some of the people that were stuck out there, and he was just kind of just BSing with them, just talking to them like they were just his buddies and trying to keep everybody entertained while the weather went away. And he was just like that guy. He was just always like a very likable guy. He was always very down to earth, and he's just like a people's champion, So he's always somebody that in the golf world that I looked up to. And then just my dad. he literally risked it all to come here and give us a better life. He moved here when he was 18. He came here illegally, and then there was an amnesty, and he saw an opportunity to get us, documentation. He got us our residencies, and then brought us over. So so many people I know that have had to come here illegally and literally risk their lives, and we never had to do that thanks to my dad. He kind of put his dreams aside and just worked for us. And to me, there's nothing, that's sacrificing your dreams is kind of like the biggest thing you could do for somebody. And he just always taught us to work hard and be self-reliant. And I don't think, when people compliment me and say, hey, you're a nice person or something, it's like, I say, you gotta, bring it back to my dad. Anything good about us, me and my siblings, it's because of my dad. He was just such a great guy. He's the hardest worker I know, and people just always tell me how genuinely of a great guy he is. So anything good about me is because of him.
What is your most valuable possession?
So I have a few things. I actually I had two things. One was a glove signed by George Lopez when I caddied for him. So he's, obviously somebody who's Mexican, who you kind of look up to, who's had a good amount of success. And, he grew up very poor, and to see him kind of work his way out of that and kind of make something of himself, it's inspiring. And I caddied for him back in New York, I think in 2015, and when we finished, he gave me a glove that had the Mexican flag colors, and he signed it for me. And that was pretty special because he's probably my favorite comedian. So I still have that glove in my room. And then another glove was in 2004. 2002. I went to my first PGA tournament. I went to the '02 U.S. Open in Bethpage Black. And I remember we were watching the players, and I wanted to get an autograph, and Alex Shaka was there. He just finished practicing, and he was signing autographs. So I go over there to get an autograph, and I'm next to go, and two kids jump in front of me, just cut in front of me to get his autograph. And I was like, that's kind of messed up, but whatever. And he sees that, and once he signs their hats, and then he comes over to me, grabs my hat, signs it, and then he goes like, wait, hold on, takes his glove off that he had been practicing with, signs that, and he says, here, because he had to wait a little longer. So that was kind of cool, just to have him, acknowledge that I had been cut, and then give me a little extra, reminder of that U.S. Open. And it was the first professional golf tournament that I had ever been to. That was pretty cool. That one, though, I remember I used it on my last round at Nationals, my second year in college, kind of as a good luck thing, and I remember it ripped on me, so I had to throw it out. But I don't have that one anymore, but that was a very special thing I had.
Do you have any interesting pre or post match rituals?
I do. So I always mark my ball I have a 10 pesos coin and a 5 pesos coin. The 10 one, it has the Aztec calendar on it, so I've always liked it, and 5 is my favorite number. So I've always had a 10 and a 5, and I use those to mark my ball. And when I mark it, I usually go to mark it tail side down because it has an eagle on it. And if I ever make a birdie, I'll keep it that. On the next hole when I mark it, I'll mark it on the same side. But if I had a bad hole the previous hole, I'll flip it to the head side. So depending on how I'm playing, I'll be flipping it back and forth. And I always mark it with either one of those coins. So that's kind of like my ritual. Just how I mark the ball. And if things are going well, I always mark it the same way. If things are not going well, I'll switch it up. I guess to kind of just switch up the mojo. So, I don't know. I don't know if it works or not, but it's always been a thing.
All right. Anything else that you can think of to be helpful in telling your story? Who else are you?
I was just, I think caddies, I'm a little biased because I'm a caddy myself and I have been for a long time, but people often overlook how instrumental caddies are to the game. I remember Ben Crenshaw in his final round at the Masters. He brought out his old caddy to caddy for him on the last hole, and he said, this guy was super important into me winning all the tournaments I won. We get to see so much of what goes on out there, kind of inside the ropes, and what happens at the top golf courses in the U.S. And you go and sit into a caddy yard and you hear some of the best stories you'll ever see, and a lot of the times like the caddies are better golfers than the members. So I just always thought that I've always been proud to be a caddy, because you just see so many things that other people don't get to see, and like to think that you help out in a lot of the victories, and you also have a part in the defeats. So definitely the caddy's perspective, I would say, should not be